how do we bring balance? How do we bring awareness? How do we get back in tune with these senses? The first place I go is first just the awareness of it, right? The acceptance and the loving awareness of bringing into it, right? We know of this idea of the watcher, right? We are so much more than our symptoms and our pains and our conditions, right? They are a part of us and they need to be moved through, but we are so much more than that. We aren't human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So it's realizing that by bringing this spiritual and watching presence to the emotional balance that's happening, that's step number one. Just doing that alone, you're going to see things shift.
And welcome to another episode of Carpe Diem Living the Podcast. I am your host, Shane Gitmid, and today we have on the show Harrison coming from all the way from Australia. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited for our chat.
Yes, and I was telling him that I love his outfit, and I'm sure you guys that are watching the show are just like, yes, like we could even just talk about your style right now. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny. As I was getting sort of prepared for this conversation, I was putting on clothes. I'm like you say I'm wearing an outfit, but honestly, this is just, I try to be as efficient as possible with all elements of my life. And I thought, okay, I'm cold right now and I want to be comfortable for this conversation. So I'm going to put on the things that feel good. That's my style.
Yes. No, you know what? I am the same way. Like even for this show, it's so like lax, right? So I'm just like, if you want to wear a hoodie, wear a hoodie. I could care less, as long as you're comfortable to talk, we're good. So I totally understand what you mean. But oh my gosh, Harrison has such a story to share with us. And currently he's a CHEK certified holistic health coach and heart-centered personal trainer. So, where do we even begin? You can take it away and let us know, your journey and how you got here.
So, yeah, I'm a CHEK holistic health coach. So what that means is I'm trained under the CHEK Institute, which is a holistic health coaching, just sort of teaching education system based in the US, actually down in San Diego. But so my journey to sort of becoming that now has come from a life of seeking things outside of myself. So I had a very normal upbringing, a very loving and comfortable and safe upbringing. And when I reached the age of 18, I got to a point where I wanted to find myself. I wanted to find the thing that lights me up. And rather than sort of asking myself that and going inwards to really sit with that and see what that was, I went outside of myself to see that. And for a short amount of time, that's good, right? So I went out into the world, traveled around the world, went to all these different countries, spent a lot of time in the US, in Europe, Asia, etc. But I very quickly, that became the only thing I did. So I very quickly went down the drugs, the alcohol, the excessive traveling, the excessive sort of getting into one-night stands, relationships, all these sort of things. And I hit a wall. Eventually, I hit a wall where those things, I started to becoming identified by those elements. I saw them as being my love, but they weren't, right? They were just very quick hits of pleasure and excess and serotonin and dopamine, all those things. And long story short, I was in an airplane line to enter the US. I'd been in this line up many times before, was about to give my passport, and I was taken away to a side room, and I spent the next 2 to 3 days detained and questioned and locked up and sequestered away. Basically, the ending of that was I was deported back to Australia, and all of my travel and all of the things I'd spent so many years getting used to and defining myself by was taken away. And not only was it taken away, it was blasted back into my face and telling me that I was a criminal, that I was a horrible person, that I had been doing all the things wrong. So the only way I could go from there was into myself and looking at how do I find and determine my sense of well-being. I determine my sense of self-love by the things that make me healthy and whole. My food, my movement, my sleeping patterns, my stress management, my emotional well-being. And again, long story short, that led me to not only upscaling these things in myself and realizing the love I'd been searching for all that time was in me, but then I realized that I'm not special here, right? I'm not the only person that's going through these series of steps, and I realized that I can help others with a similar journey.
Wow. Yeah, what a story. And it's very powerful because I feel like, especially when you're seeking all these outward things, it's because you're trying to find that sense of belonging. You're trying to find things that you feel are missing. And so we assume we're like, oh, if we don't have it now, it's got to be somewhere out there. That's why the traveling and trying to meet people. But I mean, of course, who doesn't love to travel? It's just all comes down to like the balance of it, like the reasonings behind it of why you're doing that thing. I mean, especially now we have a lot of digital nomads. I'm sure you've seen it. There's like ads for, what country is it? I think it's Costa Rica, where people are like going there to like work and live and just do this whole thing, which is all great, but it's all temporary. We can't just like escape and stay there forever. Like that's not life. I mean, if you were to say like how many years did it take for you to kind of go through this whole circle? How long was that of like the discovery, the healing?
So the healing is definitely still happening, but the journey, sort of the turnaround in which I started shifting. So I started when I was 18, and I stopped and started really going inwards and focusing more on this way of thinking when I was 25. So what's that, 6-7 years of doing all of that. And again, this is not me sort of disparaging it, because I'm actually really grateful for that, because I had such an excess of it so quickly, so much of it. It has now allowed me to just take a full 360, 180 turn and now step forward from it. But yeah, it did take me a while, but I think it was meant to be that way. And I think the breadcrumbs have definitely, now that I look back on them, they're like, oh yeah, that's why I did that. That's why I met that person. That's why I went to that place. And that's sort of where I am at now.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, because I mean, that's why our stories are story. And there's usually like that buildup, and then you hit the climax and it's like, okay, now we're towards not the end, but on the fourth quarter. And the reason why I ask about the time is because a lot of people assume when it comes to, solving a problem or like starting their healing path, they want the results now. They think, oh, maybe in a year, I'll be like a whole nother person. That may be so, but it still takes a lot more time than that. And it's more of a marathon than a sprint. So that's why I was like, I was curious on like, for you personally, how that went. Oh my gosh. So as a holistic health coach, what do you currently do like with your clients? I mean, obviously you're taking your experience, your training. What do you mainly focus on?
Good question. When you say the word holistic health coach, what does that mean? So the reason that I got into this line of work and coaching people and helping and supportive people is because I very quickly realized that we aren't isolated mechanistic beings. We aren't a human with a respiratory system. We aren't a human with a circulatory system. We aren't a human with a inflammatory lymphatic system. We are human with all these things that are interacting with each other consecutively together all the time. So how I aim to help people just broadly is I look at it through 6 different lenses. I look at it through an emotional and mindset lens, a nutrition, movement, sleep, recovery, and stress management. And they're the lenses I bring into any challenge that comes to me, and then the nuances that develop from there, that's where the coaching comes in. But right now, when you ask me that question, like it's always evolving, right? And as you have just heard, there are so many ways that you can tackle it. And when someone comes to me, it's the hardest part is working out where to start first. And where I'm currently starting first with a big range of clients is I'm really being pulled to the energetic centers, right? The energetic chakra centers, because I'm really noticing, and it's funny within this conversation, I'm also noticing it as well, that a lot of these challenges, these health challenges that we go through, a lot of them, a big fundamental base is the emotions, right? Is our emotional balance or imbalance. So where I'm working with clients right now is working out where we're unbalanced with our heart center, right? The place of our giving and receiving of love. Where are we unbalanced in our solar plexus, right? The place of our personal power and our personal will, our fire, what our truth is. Where are we balanced with our throat energetic center, right? What things are we saying in the world, or what things are we not saying, right? So that's where I'm sort of helping people most at the moment, and then taking steps forward beyond there to take in all the other different lenses.
I love that. I love that there's a lot more knowledge and awareness around, chakras, because a lot of people are just like, what in the world is that? And they just thought it was some made up thing. I'm like, you have no idea like how much it makes a difference when you are in alignment, right? Like when you're out of alignment, because you feel it. And I've gotten very well versed with, Reiki and all that good stuff. I even got like a chakra workbook because I just love workbooks. And even as a grown person, I'm like, I just want to just write in them. But I think it's just so important to like understand, like if you're feeling like, XYZ, what chakra is being affected, if you feel very like, for myself personally, I notice my root chakra can get a little bit rocked here and there, depending on like what's going on. So I have essential oils that help me feel grounded. Since you're very obviously knowledgeable in this, what are things that you do to help you stay grounded? And just like, what do you do to like check in with yourself if you feel like there may be an imbalance there?
Well, actually, I want to take it a step back first, but what you just said there. And the link that people, not only do I find a lot of people and clients and people that come into my world for help with this, is not only is that woo-woo sort of, is this a real thing element going on, but it's also the understanding that this is linked to physiology, right? It's not just an emotional imbalance, right? So if I have an emotional imbalance in my throat energetic center, that's going to be connected to thyroid imbalance and hormone imbalance. And that, as we know, has a whole chain of events connected to that. So I wanted to hit on that because it's so important. But going back to your question, how do we bring balance? How do we bring awareness? How do we get back in tune with these senses? The first place I go is first just the awareness of it, right? The acceptance and the loving awareness of bringing into it, right? We know of this idea of the watcher, right? We are so much more than our symptoms and our pains and our conditions, right? They are a part of us and they need to be moved through, but we are so much more than that. We aren't human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So it's realizing that by bringing this spiritual and watching presence to the emotional balance that's happening, that's step number one, right? Just doing that alone, you're going to see things shift, right? The next step, I think, is really education and reaching out for support, because this is such a big topic and there are so many symptoms and things to decipher. I think it's your responsibility to start learning, right? Start learning. Okay, if I am starting to feel anger, for example, if I'm starting to feel an unbalance in anger, for me, the first place I go with that is the solar plexus, right? And I go to the liver specifically, and I go to, okay, what's your relationship with your father in your life, right? We know that anger is connected to your father growing up and your relationship with him. And is there some imbalance there? And how can that be addressed? And then how can that be linked to the liver and the solar plexus? Step number 3, right? Once we have that knowledge, once we have that awareness, either through reaching out to a professional or podcasts or books, we have so much information these days. Step number 3 is doing practical tips or practical sort of steps to start balancing that out. So what I use, right, there's 3 things that I use. I use positive affirmations, because we know that the voice, when we bring words to an existence, we're manifesting the reality that we want. I would encourage anyone to look into the work of Joe Dispenza, as he is really big on that, right? So affirmations. And then I go into visualizations, a meditative visualization, right? So, for example, with the throat chakra, we can go into a visualization of connecting to the color blue, because blue, all the different energetic centers have a different color that represents to it. So we go into our mind, visualize the color blue, and what I use is a mist, right? A powerful mist that's moving through our mouth, moving through our throat, moving through our tongue, and strengthening that area and feeling the emotions that come up to heal, soothe, and empower that center and bring it back to balance.
Oh my gosh. You know, I feel like you're picking up something on me because when you started mentioning the solar plexus and the liver, I was like, that's me. I was like, yep, he's intuitive for sure. Cause I was just like, of all the examples you could have used. And I was like, But it's funny because I'm actually doing, I'm getting recertified again in Reiki this weekend. So I'm like,
Cool.
yes, I'm so like, I just live for this stuff. Just like, I call it my toolbox. You just got to put all these things in your spiritual toolbox and you never know where it can apply. One thing that did pop out to me, and I do have to ask, is your ancestral view when it comes to, you know, holistic health. I think you're one of the first people I've come across that mentioned this. So can we dive into that and like how you bring that into your work?
So this is funny because when we were talking off air about this, about the different areas we could talk about, and I kind of put myself into a corner here, because it's funny. Each of these little elements that you bring up, I could do a whole conversation on just them alone. And I'm so grateful for you picking them out, because I think the reason I'm feeling really intuitive to what you just said is because I really enjoy talking about this. So I'm in such a flow right now, if you haven't picked that up. But in answer to your question, so when I think of ancestral, I think of two things. Firstly, I think of epigenetics, and I think of how I am showing up in this world is not just an outcome of how I'm making choices and making decisions and making action. It's also connected to my family. It's connected to the ancestors that have come before me, and how their trauma, how their pain, and how their positive choices are a part of me. And that's not a disempowering element. That's an empowering element, because I can both use my power to transform the pain, or I can use my power to take their lessons and push myself forward even more. So that's one way I bring it in. Two, when I think of ancestrally, I think back to practices that we've been using for thousands of years before we've stepped into this industrial life. And don't get me wrong, I am so excited that I can speak to you on the other side of the world right now and be in this industrial life, and I'm very grateful for it. But when it comes to our health and the things that we've evolved to be holistic and well with, our health hasn't adjusted to this industrial way of living. So I think about movement, for example. When I think of ancestral movement, I'm thinking about not just going to the gym. That has a place, and I go to the gym every week. But I think about, okay, what is a way of moving that is more functional and ancestral for me? So it doesn't have to be just doing biceps with weight in the gym. It could mean getting out onto the ground, getting out onto the earth, onto the sand, onto the beach, and moving in a way that feels really good, right? Moving in a very rhythmic way, maybe dancing, maybe rolling around like an animal on the sand, maybe swimming in the ocean like an animal, right? This, to me, when we think of our ancestral roots, this is how we exercised in the past. We didn't have gyms. We didn't have all these machines. We exercised in a way that was intuitive and felt good to us. So to summarize that, when I think of ancestral, when I bring it into all these different lenses, I think about what we have evolved to do for thousands of years and how that makes us more optimized in this current present moment.
My gosh. Yeah. You just have so much knowledge. I could just hear you talk all day because I'm just like, I'm learning so much. And for me, I just love absorbing it all and thinking of how I could apply it to my own life. Like that's the beauty of podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just such a great point. Like what did people do back then for their movement? And, you know, there's such a not stigma, but there's such a negative feel to like the word like working out. That's why when people hear that, they're like, oh, I don't want to work out. But if you change the tone to it to mindful movement, that's actually what I have in my planner instead of going to the gym or whatever. Because I even noticed with myself such a shift in that reframe of like, I actually do like setting time for my mindful movement versus just working out or fitness or whatever the case is. So I think that's so great.
You said a little thing in there, and that's it. With exercise specifically and fitness specifically, how we make it long-term, how we make it a lifestyle practice and rather something to just achieve a goal of weight loss, which is good, but we want exercise and fitness to be long-term. And how we do that has to be something exciting and that fills us full of joy and makes us happy. And if it's mindful movement, if it's dancing, if it's having sex, if it's whatever the thing is, if it lights you up and makes you happy, that's going to be the thing you're going to do long term.
That's true. Because that's why it takes so long for some people to like even stay consistent with their workout routine because they're still trying to find the activities they enjoy. And even with myself, you know, I didn't grow up as an athlete. I wasn't active in any sports in that way because personally, my mom wanted me to focus more on music. She just kind of wanted to shield me from any injuries. I can't control that. But as I grew up, I was like, I actually do enjoy, you know, playing soccer or doing flag football and things like that in school. And then as an adult, I'm like, okay, well, now that we aren't like, it's not mandatory to work out because of school, what do I want to do? And I tried countless things. And honestly, it came down to just doing certain fitness classes. Like I like spin classes. I like Pilates. I do Pilates and row class like multiple times a week. So I'm like, finally, I found my jam, like something that I like. To me, it's not a chore. Like I block off time and I let nothing get in the way of me going there. So, I mean, what is it like in Australia? Like, do you guys have like different fitness classes as well? Or, I mean, I know you obviously have gyms, but like, do you guys have any specialty classes there?
I think it's pretty similar. I think, like I said, I've spent a lot of time in the States and it's pretty much the same. I wouldn't say there's like the crew and the rowing and the basketball teams and the football teams. In the States, there's more of a culture around all of that and being a part of that tribal community, which is really supportive most of the time. Here, in my experience, there's less culture around those things. It's definitely those sports, and especially in university and college, those things exist as well. But it's that sort of fraternal element is not in Australia as much. But I would say a big difference is there's a lot more nature here that we get lost in with our sporting activities, like surfing, right? It's such a big culture here throughout the country. Being like, I grew up in the surf club, right? Surf club is very a big part of a lot of sporting culture here, like being a part of the beach, being a part of saving people at the beach, being a part of all the sports that we can do at the beach, like being on boards, being in swimming, you know, flag sort of events as well. So that would be the main difference. Is in the States, it's more fraternal and a lot of tribal communities that are very supportive. Here, it's the big difference I would notice is there's a big link to the nature and how we can add sporting elements to that side of things.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because I mean, surfing's pretty big, but like in Southern California, where I'm at, there's not, the oceans are too cold because it's the Pacific. So it's just not, it's not warm enough. But Southern, yeah, we definitely have more surfers. Yeah, I think that's really nice that you guys integrate that. You put more focus on the nature aspect of the sports. I mean, now more and more people are hiking. So there's that type of workout. But you know, it's interesting that you mentioned the tribal aspect of like the culture of the sports, because I don't know if you're like familiar with human design. You probably are, but
a little bit.
Yeah, human design's like more and more people are learning about it. But I found out that I have a lot of tribal like aspects to my chart. So it kind of makes sense that everything I do, it feels very much part of like the collective. And I like doing things in groups. And I just feel more empowered when I have like my tribe. So it's just really cool. So this podcast, I find people that I consider part of my tribe, like you, because we're all so like-minded and we're on that same path of like, we just want to implement the holistic lifestyle in every way we can. And I just love it so much. So do you have, as a holistic health coach, do you have like maybe top 3 tips you can give to someone that's kind of wanting to learn more about how to approach life in this view? And then we can talk about any projects that you're currently working on.
Top 3 places to start. Well, firstly, it's the emotions. So I grew up as a man that was told not to feel, not to express, not to release, not to cry, not to feel all the things. And I very quickly realized that that is very untrue. That is definitely, I grew up thinking that emotions were too feminine. And if I expressed and feel and cried, I was not being a masculine man. And for any men listening, I want to tell you that's the exact opposite. I think crying is a powerful sense of you standing in your truth and everything that defines you. So that would be tip number 1, is feel it to heal it. So feel your emotions, learn about them, and let them move through you. Remember that emotions are energy in motion. And so when we allow the emotions to flow and be, then we heal and empower ourselves. So that would be step number 1. Step number 2 is, as we've probably picked up in this conversation, connect back to nature as much as you can. So whether that means grounding and getting outside, getting your bare feet on the ground and feeling the loving energy of the earth, not just from that root perspective that you're talking about, connecting back to Mother Earth, but just from an anti-inflammatory perspective. We know that getting our feet on the ground can lower inflammation that we get from eating, that we get from EMFs, that we get from toxic overload, right? So that would be step number 2, getting out into nature and just bathing in it as much as you can. Step number 3 would be honing in on what you are eating. So the gut is the center of all nutritional health, in my opinion. And a lot of us, unfortunately, are not nurturing the garden of our gut. And when the gut is imbalanced, inflamed, in dysbiosis, it's not just impacting the gut, it's impacting our mental well-being, it's impacting our skin, it's impacting energy that we have for exercise and relationships and sleep and all these things. So get back to healing the gut. And that is a whole other podcast, but I would say the 3 biggest things we can look at there within the gut health is really looking at getting rid of all processed sugar, really getting rid of all hydrogenized and refined vegetable oils because they're so ubiquitous everywhere. And number 3 is really looking at all of the unorganic, unfermented grain, processed grain products that are everywhere. So feel it to heal it, loving and getting out and bathing in nature, and flowering and growing and looking after the gut that is your garden.
You totally hit all the spots more than I could even ask for. So, oh my gosh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. And I just love everything that you're doing. Please share with our audience where they can find you online to connect with you and just to see everything that you're up to.
So first of all, I wanted to say I'm so grateful for having this conversation. Thank you for having me on your platform and allowing me to share my voice with your listeners. I'm so grateful, and I just appreciate any opportunity to speak from my heart. So all the love, thank you. I'm always looking for new people to coach, support, and love. So you can reach out to me by either going to my website, which is harrisonmeagher.com, and that's Ma spelled MEAGHER. You go to my website, you can see the contact form and just go from there. You can also reach out to me by Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse, or Twitter. I'm very active on all those social media platforms, and my handle is @HarrisonMeagher. Again, Ma spelled MEAGHER.
Perfect. And of course, all the links and all the information will be in the description box below. And thank you so much. You just have the kindest soul. And I'm just so glad to have met you today. So everyone, check out everything that Harrison is up to. And we are so grateful for everyone that is listening to this episode. And we'll catch you guys all next time. Thank you so much again.
Bye. Thanks for having me.